been kind enough to come and share their knowledge and information. And today's session is a very unique, which talks about quantum growth. When I read this topic, I was really, pleased to see that, and because in today's VUCA world, when we heard first this VUCA word from the Unilever, once I was reading the chairman's speech, and first time I read that word there. But today's time is really a VUCA word where it is uncertainties are there, and then a lot of challenges are also there. In this time, how we keep our growth and how do we keep ourselves sustainable. And today for this session, joining us is Mr. Nitin Ghadiyar, who is an expert and a veteran and a senior leader in FMCG and pharma industry. He is widely regarded to be among the top corporate professionals in that space. He has an enviable track record of over 35 years, mainly in multinationals and large Indian corporates like Glaxo, Colgate-Palmolive, Park Davis, Ticket Pyramid, Johnson & Johnson, and Dabur. He's a master in management from Jamnalal Bajaj Institute, and he is particularly recognized as an expert in OTC and self-medication and healthcare business in India. Mr. Ghadiyar specializes in turnaround and quantum growth assignments. He has had a successful track record in launching new businesses and has a wide local and global exposure in acquisitions, mergers, joint ventures, and strategic alliances. Most of his work experience has been as the head of business, and his significant assignments are as group director of Park Davis, managing director, Ticket Pyramid, president and executive director, Johnson & Johnson, and executive director, Dabur. Mr. Ghadiyar has been instrumental in helping building over 20 national brands in Indian consumer product and pharmaceutical segments. This is really an achievement, sir. Mr. Ghadiyar now actively operates as a consultant in various sectors to both large corporates and to SMEs and family managed businesses, and has been serving as executive director on a few boards. Mr. Ghadiyar is associated with management education as well, and has served on governing board of St. Xavier Institute of Management, and is also on faculty of several leading management institutes. In fact, he is the core faculty at Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management, which he has been closely associated for past several years, and is also a faculty at SPJMR, a top 5 management institute in India. Mr. Ghadiyar, thank you very much for taking out your time, and we look forward to a very exciting and enlightening session for all our members and participants. All is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rajesh, for that kind introduction. And may I thank Dr. Kavita Lagate and the Bombay Management Association for inviting me to share some thoughts with you this evening. Ironically, the topic that I'm going to be talking on is quantum growth. And in the last 2.5 years, all we have had is the antithesis of growth. It has been the retardation of growth and challenges which have been posed in the macro environment, first by the horrendous once-in-a-century COVID-19 pandemic, and now by the horrible multipolar world, which is exercising its muscles and threatening each other with nuclear might in an absolutely wasteful war in Ukraine, where thousands are dying as we speak. So the world as we speak today is undergoing unmitigated challenges. The pandemic itself was a terrible challenge because it led to loss of lives, and all of us have lost friends and family in the horrible aftermath of that pandemic. It has also resulted in the lack of jobs. It has resulted in the deceleration of growth. You would have seen today the monthly results of Bajaj Auto and the tractor companies and there is actually a retardation of growth, especially in rural demand for two-wheelers and tractors. And also we are seeing a general slowdown in economic growth. And we debate whether 5.4% on a denuded base in GDP growth is good or bad versus 5.7. And it's all an exercise of discussing how pygmies would discuss growth. That's the scenario in the global world right now. Do not get confused with the results that have been posted in by some companies, which have been able to manage through the process of cost avoidance and reduction of cost, some amount of stability in top line and EBITDA. The real impact of the pandemic is starting now. What we are now about to witness is really an inflation-led. One of the outcomes of the pandemic was that governments the world over, reserve banks, central banks the world over printed notes, resulting in a large amount of inflation, resulting in a large contraction of demand at higher prices. Less is the quantity demanded. Their rates are higher, further putting pressures on growth. And that's the kind of pangs the international market is going through. As a result, you have seen that bubbles and froth disappear as soon as they are created. And my experience of creating value over the last 4 decades, quarter on quarter and month on month, tells me that there are no shortcuts to growth, let alone to quantum growth. The real growth happens only when value is created. Value for the customer, value in the value proposition, a value in the value chain, value for stakeholders, including suppliers, vendors, employees, and eventually value for shareholders through the process of building brands, what we call today market cap. So there are no shortcut routes to value creation. There are no short routes to quantum growth. And quantum growth has to arise out of a painstaking understanding of what this value represents to the various stakeholders that we talked about, largely the customer. And we therefore need to be customer-centric and market-driven in our approach to quantum growth. Now, in times like these, which are difficult, it is even a greater challenge to ensure growth. The base itself is eroded, and you are now talking about GDP growth from that base. You're talking about growing 4 times the size of the market and inflation at a time when inflation is also inflated. So the challenges in the environment are likely to be significant going forward. And therefore, the whole concept of understanding what I'm going to try to tell you today becomes even more important, because when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And you have to combine that with strategy, but more importantly, with go-to-market action and passion. That is what quantum growth is all about. And if companies need to succeed and grow in quantum terms, they have to think beyond the obvious, and they have to think beyond mere meetings and staring at computers, and get down to understanding the smell of the bazaar and understanding the factors that drive quantum growth, the big ticket growth drivers and the big ticket growth inhibitors, and build upon the big ticket growth drivers in any environment and ecosystem, and address the big ticket inhibitors of growth, with the latter being even more important than working on the growth drivers. Because if you don't deal with the headwinds, the tailwinds are unlikely to come in and rescue you. That is the concept of quantum growth, which I have learned over the last 40 years. And therefore, we're going to talk about some of these with a couple of examples from what Rajesh ji mentioned from my own biodata, which is experiences with quantum growth. And I've had a 4-decade checkered history and experience of quantum growth. And I've been fortunate to be on the right side of the quantum growth trajectory for most of my life and for most of my career. So I'm going to share some of the secrets which I have lived with in terms of how to kind of look at quantum growth and how to deliver quantum growth very briefly, and then take you through 2 quick case studies out of the 5 or 6 mentioned by Rajesh ji, just to explain how quantum growth in action actually has happened in my own life and in the life of my colleagues who helped me to deliver quantum growth in the environments that I will talk about. The concept of growth is the negation of retardation of growth. Now you're looking at the war right now. It is a terrible war by these multipolar superpowers. It is not for the first time that we are seeing such irresponsible action of aggression and such wanton destruction of civilian life and property. We have seen that in Aleppo in Syria. We've seen that in Iraq and Mosul. We've seen that in Libya. We've seen that in Yemen. We know what happened to the Contra rebels of Nicaragua. And we have a neighbor up north who is hegemonistic and who only believes in annexing other people's territories and other sovereign nations. So we are living in this nasty concept of superpowers that dominate hegemonistic interests for personal and material gain. And therefore, which one is better is anybody's choice. Of course, this one is not good. And as I speak, I hope and pray with you that some lives at least are saved tonight in the cities of Kiev and Kharkiv in the Ukrainian country. And we hope that some wiser sense prevails. But the concept is that quantum growth is derailed with these activities. Brent at more than 111 US dollars is not funny. And we import a large part of Brent. And this economy depends on importation of Brent and crude. Unfortunately, our Reserve Bank at this time is in some kind of an Alice in Wonderland concept, being very, very kind of accommodative and being very dovish at a time when it is, the best of doves will be eaten up by hawks. And it is a matter of time before this fairyland monetary policy and this unbelievable fiscal policy, which is, made possible only because of two very strong reforms, demonetization and GST, which are the best things that have happened to our country. That is what is keeping the fiscal policy going. The GST collections are keeping it going. But we are in a state of very severe concerns in terms of whether growth will carry forward in the way that we have wanted it to, and whether demand conditions will be restored so that quantum growth can happen. Quantum growth doesn't happen in books of accounts. It does not happen by number crunching and bean counting. It does not happen by staring into computers, as I told you, and sitting in boardrooms. It happens in the marketplace where the smell of the bazaar guides the creation of value. Now that is the concept. And when you have international scenario of both economic and geopolitical concerns dominating, the quantum growth exercise becomes even more difficult. And therefore we have to understand that each company, regardless of whether it is B2B, B2C, government, public sector, private sector, SME, family-run business, all businesses will come under pressure, and they have to navigate their way through this pressure into the path of quantum growth. Now, having said that, I do not wish to frighten you, because the strong will emerge and the men will be separated from the boys. And eventually, you will have companies, brands, and businesses which will be able to defy the challenges of the macro world and come in and create new value in the ecosystem. Now, these are not paper tigers which are just believing in valuation and private equity players, iski topi uske sar. That is not the growth I'm talking about. The growth I'm talking about is the real creation of value reflected in brands and services. And that is the real growth that we're talking about. And the leaders of 2040 will be completely different from those of 2022. And those that will get there will be a different set of people who are responsive to technology, responsive to changes in consumer preferences and expectations, and who are responsive to the need to think completely out of the box and to think completely aligned with customers and markets. Those are the ones that will drive quantum growth. And in the Nifty 50, not even 30 out of the current 50 Nifty 50 companies will feature in the Nifty 50 of 2040. You will have another 30 come in. if at all Nifty 50 remains Nifty 50, and the new SEBI and other chairpersons don't consult unnecessary yogis who are not actually in the Himalayas, but sit in Chennai. So the question is, the whole concept of which companies will succeed and which companies will create value depends on how you take your approach to quantum growth. Now, let me define, having given you the background, and Rajesh and others will permit me to deviate from the topic given the serious macroeconomic headwinds which we are all facing. And quantum growth, therefore, will have to be understood in those headwinds. And therefore, you will permit me for the slight deviation, which I have done, but which will help you to make sense of what really quantum growth is. Quantum growth is what incrementalism is not. So incrementalism is growing 3%, 5.3%, for example, which is what GDP growth was in the last quarter. That is incrementalism. And especially if the 5.3 is on a low base, that is pure and total incrementalism. So that is not quantum growth. And I wish the finance minister would have been part of the BMA audience here to understand what I'm saying. And quantum growth therefore has to happen immediately with the creation of demand. There cannot be a time lag where you then invest in infrastructure. The infrastructure will then translate into jobs. Jobs may translate into income. Income may translate into demand. Demand may then translate into consumption. Consumption will translate into top line and bottom line growth. Madam Nirmala Sitharaman should realize that there are several gaps between the cup and the lip in this approach. And what is here and now is quantum growth, because in the long run, we are all dead. And therefore, if you are not good enough in the last quarter, and if you are not good enough on the 30th or 31st, or in this case in February, on the 28th of the month, then you are not good for quantum growth. So quantum growth arises, it's a way of life. It is a DNA element. It happens all the time. And it is a combating of the attitude of incrementalism. Incrementalism is growing in line with the market. It is growing in line with inflation. And even if inflation moves to 7.5%, like it has in the US right now, and in India, we don't really know what the real count is. Only the governor of RBI seems to know. But the real count of inflation in India may already be at 8 to 10%. Because there is a lot of sampling and non-sampling errors which come into the inflation mode. So growing at the rate of inflation or growing at the rate of market is incrementalism. Growing 3 times or 4 times the rate of inflation and growing 3 or 4 times the rate of market growth, which is creating substantial growth in the market and substantial growth in market share. That is how I define quantum growth. So it's the ability to kind of take your business, your value, much ahead of the market, much ahead of competition, much ahead of the environment, much ahead of the macro headwinds. Now, if you can do all of that, you indulge in quantum growth. Now, everybody wants quantum growth. Nobody wants to grow in line with incrementalism. Everybody wants to double, quadruple in 2 years. Everybody wants to become a so many $1 trillion economy. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen in speeches. It also doesn't happen by the creation of fantasy or by creation of ideas which do not beget immediate growth. So quantum growth has to talk about the business plan for FY22. Quantum growth has to talk about guidance for Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 of that growth plan. Quantum growth has to think out of the box. And therefore, in terms of quantum growth, there are a few do's and a few don'ts. And the essential ingredients of quantum growth is that you have to have a mindset to grow ahead of competition. You need to have the courage of conviction, as I told you, to identify the big ticket growth drivers and to build on them, leverage on them, leveraging on your core competencies, leveraging on your financial, people, and consumer strengths, and taking up those big ticket growth ideas to the logical conclusion. Quantum growth is about identifying big ticket growth inhibitors And every business has reasons or elements in the business mix which get in the way of growth. Now, unless those are addressed, you are only talking about creation of growth in the vacuum of real strategies to deliver growth. If you don't, ensure that you get rid of the tumor that is causing cancerous development in the body, you can't look at a healthy body. So the tumor first has to be eliminated, whether through chemo, whether through surgery, whether through whatever. And unless those growth inhibitors are gotten rid of, you can't look at quantum growth, you can't look at growth strategies. Merely raising capital, merely getting into capital expenditure, as the current fiscal policy would have us believe, doesn't automatically result in quantum growth, because a lot of it gets eroded, some of it in ineffective execution, some of it in corruption of the bureaucracy and of the corporates, and the nexus between corporate and bureaucratic and politician corruption has been reduced, not eliminated. Some of it gets evaporated in an inopportune strategy. So the question is to get the right strategies for quantum growth, and the biggest strategy is implementation, because quantum growth requires that it's only 10% strategy, 90% implementation. And the two examples that I will give you will talk about how implementation was the key strategy for quantum growth. So if you thought that if you can go to the big four and get a report, strategic report on quantum growth, and that will deliver quantum growth for you, you are mistaken, because quantum growth is about leadership. It is about implementation on the ground. It is about carrying stakeholders, your employees, your dealers, your business partners with you. It is about creation of passion and infusion of an infectious amount of enthusiasm in all of the stakeholders to deliver the strategy. Sometimes, even if the strategy of quantum growth is wanting, it can still deliver because of the ferocity of implementation. And you are looking at, therefore, a weak strategy that the Kremlin is putting out, which will eventually, bulldoze the Ukrainians. But you are seeing it being combated and thwarted by passionate, rabble-rousing implementation. So for the pseudo-secular, seditionists who keep telling us what freedom is about, learn a little bit of nationalism from the Ukrainians, who then stand in and prevent tankers from rolling into their cities. That is the concept that you need to have: passion, rabble-rousing. And if you need to grow, or if you need to prevent destruction of growth, you need passion and infectious enthusiasm. And you need to be a leader who infects his teams with that enthusiasm. That is the concept of quantum growth. Not all of this is in textbooks. This is what I have experienced. This is what I have actually felt when my teams and I have attempted to deliver quantum growth. And what I'm sharing with you, therefore, is straight out of corporates that you have heard of, brands that you have heard of. And I have been associated in building 20 national brands, as Rajesh has said, including some from Glaxo like Complan, Nycil, Glucon-D, the Colgate Suraksha Chakra, the Kapil Dev Palmolive Da Jawab Nahi, the first shampoo sachet, Halls, Chiclets, Benadryl, Gelusil, Listerine, Saridon, Dettol. These are all brands in your home chest right now. Dabur Hanitas, and all of these brands, my teams and I have had the good fortune of working on and of delivering quantum growth with. Now, that is the concept of quantum growth. And you have to therefore look at thinking out of the box, innovating. You don't need to have the frog in the pond activity. You don't have to have the attitude of not taking risks. So quantum growth is about taking business risks, risks which are reasonable, risks which are sometimes quite heavy and difficult to take at the time that you take in those risks. And these risks have to be taken without the fear of failure. Because if you have the fear of failure, you will be unable to take those business risks. So quantum growth requires taking of risks. It doesn't require you to be conservative, to be incrementalist. You need to move out. But those risks have to be taken in the context of reality. without the fear of failure, as long as you don't repeat the mistakes that you make, and as long as you own the failure and share and celebrate success. So quantum growth requires promoters, managing directors, owners, business owners to own failure, learn from failures and mistakes, because nobody is God to be making the 100% right decisions. And then to kind of look at, for example, ways to overcome those mistakes so that they are not repeated going forward. And then to also take ownership for the mistake. ये नहीं कि अगर ठीक कुछ नहीं हुआ तो ये उसका fault है, और अगर सही होता है तो मेरा credit है. You in fact have to do the obverse, own failure and share and celebrate success. You give success to your team, celebrate them, give them awards, give them recognition beyond salary, beyond incentives, beyond ESOPs. That is the concept of quantum growth. And in all of this, the consumer and the market and the competition is paramount. You don't do things which you want to do, or which you think you should be doing, or which you think you have been doing, or your father or grandfather or the board or the multinational parent did. You do things that the consumer would have you do. You do, and therefore you have to be customer centric. You do things that the market will have to drive you to do, and therefore you need to be market driven. And there is no strategy that is relevant unless it is competitive. So marketing and business growth strategy, quantum growth strategy is never unilateral. It is about a multilateral competitive situation. And therefore it is about competitive marketing warfare. पड़ोसी के चूल्हे से जब तक आप आग नहीं ले आते हैं, तब तक, और पड़ोसी को आपके चूल्हे से आग नहीं लेने देते हैं, तब तक आप क्वांटम ग्रोथ समझ ही नहीं पाएंगे. So the quantum growth strategy is about competitive warfare, of providing competitive advantage. My marketing faculty and colleagues and students would tell you it's about USP. It is about the distinctive reason why consumers should buy your product in preference to competition. It is about how markets can grow, how usership can grow. So when you have a demand constriction, when you have a constraint in demand, you have to create innovative ways for increasing that by creating innovative reasons for consumer delight, by identifying benefits which may be emotional and rational, other than emotional and sensory, other than rational. Because in business, you never sell products, you never sell services, don't even sell brands, you sell benefits. And benefits are rational, emotional, and sensory. So it is about identification of those benefits that matter, and then to kind of leverage the entire value chain, the entire supply chain, value chain, production chain, information technology chain, the finance chain, the selling and distribution chain, to then deliver those in a cost-effective way and in an innovative way, constantly thinking out of the box. And therefore, some people ask me, why don't you talk about design thinking? I think design thinking is what you implement. Strategy is what strategy does. You can't create and make blocks and engage professors of marketing and design thinking and give them gainful occupation. You've got to actually demonstrate how design thinking is done by the creation of the value that I talked about. So that is quantum growth. And all of this is through the process of leadership. And I'm going to talk to you about these two quick case studies. I don't know if I'm already losing time, because we would like to kind of also keep some time for questions. But I guess I have half an hour now for a couple of case studies, and I'm not putting up charts because, an online sessions, and I've taken many in Jamnalal Bajaj, SP Jain, and with my client companies over the last 2 years. The more you distract with charts, etc., it makes it even more difficult for people to kind of remain with the span of attention. So the best way I can engage your attention is by chatting with you and by appealing to your reason, appealing to your emotion, and appealing to your understanding in terms of how you're going to approach your life in terms of quantum growth. Because if you don't have a quantum growth focus to life, it's unlikely you will have a quantum growth focus to your business. You've got to be kind of larger than life in your aspiration, and hard work needs to direct the course of your ambition. And unless you have a lot of hard work and painstaking hard work. And without dirting your feet, you can do nothing. And therefore, for 30 out of 40 years of my career, I've been head of business, ED, managing director, CEO, or whatever title you want to call it. And most of my time I have spent either on the shop floor and in the marketplace. So 70% of my time would get spent in the shop floor and in the marketplace, because quantum growth requires you a strategy whereby you demonstrate by example and you lead on by the front, lead from the front. You don't tell people what to do. You don't tell people how much to do. How to do it is what you show them. You don't tell them how to do it. You show them how it is done. And therefore, as I told you, it is 90% implementation, 10% strategy. And therefore, leadership by example is by walking the talk. And my management strategy for 40 years has been managing by wandering around. It might be completely out of fashion and out of vogue in today's work by home, work at home environment to talk about managing by wandering around. But we are not going to have, hopefully, the pandemic last for a lifetime. The next time I hope it comes is in a century that we may not be around in. And the next time that we have a war like this, I hope will be a long time from now. That will, of course, be determined in the next 48 hours. But I hope we will not have a war like this in a long time. And therefore, managing by wandering around is something I think which you want to look at, because that is where you create empathy. That is where you create a buy-in, because no one individual can ever deliver strategic quantum growth. It is teams of individuals that do. And therefore, if you think that you are the only one who has all the wisdom, all the strength, the financial muscle power to go and deliver, that's not how it works. And therefore, it is the wider team of people that actually deliver quantum growth, and therefore leading from the front, demonstrating by example, providing people a shoulder to cry on, showing them the way, tolerating failure, as I told you, owning failure, and sharing and celebrating success. All of these are strategies of quantum growth. Now, to get to the couple of examples, so that you realize that I'm not just a professor from Harvard, or professor from MIT or USC, or even a lesser school than that, who's coming in and talking theory about quantum growth. I have been living quantum growth, and I've had no choice but to deliver it in the various assignments that I've had. So the 20 national brands that I've talked about and the turnaround strategies that I have talked about are real life strategies, and they could be case studies in their own right, because they were game changers whenever they happened. And I will give you two such strategies. I will take you back to 1988 to a company called Warner Hindustan, which had hired me as marketing director in Warner Hindustan at the ripe age of 26, 27. In those days, multinationals did not take kids on the block and did not put them as board directors in multinationals. Normally, you had to wait to become MD or director on the board of a multinational. But the Warner Hindustan team had seen my work in Complan, Glucon-D, Palmolive shave cream, Colgate dental cream, and various other things, Halo shampoo, etc. They saw the enthusiasm that I reflected in the way I approached work, and they decided to take a chance by hiring me as marketing director, Warner Hindustan. 6 months later, Warner Hindustan merged into Park Davis, and I was elevated as group director of the merged entity to look after the consumer products division business. Now, bear in mind, a 27, 28-year-old at a time when mergers and acquisitions were not that common, and at a time when 14 vice presidents were replaced by 6 group directors, I came in to be one of them from the outside, while there was about 9 of them either demoted or who had to move on. So a very tumultuous kind of situation from a corporate perspective. Now, Park Davis, Warner Hindustan was 35 odd crores. Park Davis was 70 odd crores at that time. 37 odd crores at that time. And between them, they were about 70 odd crores in 1988. Both were parts of Warner Lambert Corporation, one of the greatest pharmaceutical companies in the world, which was eventually acquired by Pfizer, as you know, for the drug Lipitor that they discovered. And Lipitor continues to be the largest molecule across pharmaceutical segments in the world 25, 30 years later. You know, it is atorvastatin, a cardiovascular drug, which Warner Lambert had. So these were parts of a very big corporation. They had a very large confections business. Listerine, Listermint was part of the portfolio. Benylin, Benadryl was part of the global portfolio. They had lipid regulators. They had all kinds of gums, Halls, Chiclets, Dentine, Chlorets, name it, Babalu, all kinds of large businesses in Thailand, Latin America, Canada, in terms of the gums and confections business. But in India, of course, they were growing single digit. And this was pre-liberalization, whereby you declared profit by sale of asset. So कभी Malabar Hill में flat बेचा, कभी Hyderabad में land या factory बेची और profit declare किया. And most managing directors then and even now were busy at Willingdon Club or Bombay Gymkhana to be really wondering about what to do with quantum growth. Nobody was interested then, and several MNC managing directors are not interested even now on quantum growth and quantum growth prospects. Because, you know, these are high-stake jobs where maintenance and single-digit incrementalism does not rock the boat, and you're happier doing that rather than change the paradigm. So you needed mad people like me and my boss, Ramesh Banatwala, who decided to take a chance with me at that time. And my HR director, Surinder Singh, both of whom are no longer, and died recently. In fact, Surinder died recently. And then it took my old boss from Colgate, who realized and had seen what I had done and who was regional Asia Pacific head for Warner Lambert at that time, to give me the ability to kind of present a strategic quantum growth plan. Now imagine the confectionery and consumer business was only 7 crores, out of which Halls and Chiclets were 1 crore. And we were getting Halls back from the market. It was twist wrapped and moisture absorbed, and it would come back from the market. And everybody had stopped eating Chiclets. And therefore it was only 1 crore out of 27 crores. Park Davis was another 37 odd crores. Now, the Halls and Chiclets business was assigned to me. Waterbury's, Listerine, products like that were assigned to me. And I was asked to turn around this business. So I actually presented a plan of taking the confections business from 1 to 18 crores in a 2-year time period. Now, remember, these numbers may seem irrelevant now, but in the pre-liberalization 88 period, with an Attanni product, these are large numbers. So we talked about kind of organically growing this confections business from 1 to 18 crores and the overall Warner Hindustan business, doubling it every 2 years. Now, the point is the products were tired, old, fuddy-duddy commercials were guiding them. There was 1.5 product manager who was a prominent consultant, also one of my colleagues, erstwhile juniors from Bajaj, who you have heard of probably. He parades as brand consultant. And then there were 35, FMRI workers, and the business just didn't exist. Now, as I told you, quantum growth is about taking risk. So I said I would grow it from 1 to 18. It's another matter that we took it from 1 to 35 crores for these two brands in 2 years' time, in 88, 89, 90. But we said we would take it to a higher level, because unless you put growth on the table, nobody is interested in funding you. Then we said we would identify what the growth drivers are and the growth inhibitors are. So promptly I went to all strong markets like Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra, Mumbai. I went to weak markets like the North. I also went to international Warner Lambert markets, which are strong for Halls and Chiclets, like Thailand, like Mexico, like Canada, to understand what works on these brands. Because you don't need a non-invented here kind of a philosophy. You need to understand what drives quantum growth and what are the inhibitors of quantum growth. And then derive big ticket drivers. So the theory I was talking to you about is just what I had implemented, except that I wasn't kind of looking at it from that angle while I was doing it. So we went out and looked at what was harming growth. And we realized that this category was categorized as pharmaceuticals. So it could only be sold through chemists, and it was under price control, Halls. So at that time, I remember going along with Gurcharan Das and Bharat Patel in Procter & Gamble, and we together positioned our petition to get this classified as Ayurvedic, which is Indian medicine, by changing the names of the ingredients to Nilgiri Telam, Pudina Telam, etc. Now that was a key big ticket growth driver. It allowed us immediately to pull the product out of price control, and it allowed us to take the product out from chemists into various other forms of distribution, like hole in the wall pan bidi accounts, bakras, temples, general merchants, airports, railway stations, etc. So it kind of gave us a huge distribution opportunity to kind of take the brand away from the list restricted kind of trade. Again, the packaging was a problem. So innovation and being first and fast to opportunity is an integral part of quantum growth. So the first shampoo sachet in the country was launched not by Schick, but by me for Halo Egg. And the first pillow pack for candies in this country was launched by me for Halls. And I got the permission to go to Milan and get 2 form fill seal machines out of turn, throwing away the twist trap and replacing it by the Halls pillow pack with a form fill seal machine. So packaging is again an area of marketing, and being first and fast to opportunity is important. And you need innovative and quantum growth ideas to deal with that. Similarly, the brand moved out of price control. So from a 3 to a rupee kind of pricing, we went to a coinage of 50 paise for Halls and Chiclets, which was then termed as tender or change. And it was a pricing coinage decision, which was a big winner. Also, from an advertising perspective, I worked with J. Walter Thompson, and without doing too much of research, we realized that the brand was not only being had for cough and cold, but also as a measure for oral adult gratification, for mood disorder. Cigarette ke baad, jab boredom ho, tab. So therefore, we came up with Poo Sayani with the campaign which says, Gale mein kharash, naak ban, aur sab kuch ulta pulta. So the psychographic input, or consumer insight was deployed to completely transform the positioning of the brand. Gale mein kharash, naak ban, sab kuch ulta pulta. In those days, we launched honey lemon, we launched ice mint, and we put it into larger packs. We also transformed chiclets into new flavors, into mini chiclets. And we came up with an India mnemonic, chick, 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 which strengthened the branding of chiclets and which became the worldwide mnemonic for the brand back in 1990. Now, in all of this, we decided that we would spend a large part of our marketing mix in selling, distribution, and merchandising. So I got permission to hire 100 people. So from, a virtually nil field force, we got 100 odd people. Multinationals would give you money, capex, they wouldn't give you people. But I was fortunate to convince my bosses to give me 100 odd people. We appointed several FMCG cigarette biscuit distributors, and ready cash vans went out, distributing from small outlets in Bangalore, in Dehradun, in the hills, by the sea, everywhere. And you had the whole focus of distributor salesmen, distributors which were motivated. The distributor salesman I personally addressed with, and I would spend 100, 8 out of 25 working days, working 12 hours a day in the market, demonstrating how these brands can be sold, distributed, or merchandised. Jo dikha wo bika, to jars aa gaye, neon lights aa gaye jhopatpattiyon ke dukanon mein, dispensers aa gaye, and 70% of the money was not spent in advertising. It was spent in selling, distribution, merchandising, and promotion. So the marketing mix itself is a quantum growth indicator. And if you use the money to spend on the right things and in the right way, and with an energized field force, and many of these guys are now already sales directors, marketing directors, they have all grown because quantum growth is infectious. And it is an enthusiasm which drives it. So I would sing with them, dance with them, give them awards, take them to Goa, take them all over the place, celebrate every success, have distributor meetings, 90% implementation, 10% strategy. And while doing all of this, we were kind of constantly growing the business. As I told you, from 1 crore in halls to 25 crores, 20 lakhs in chiclets to 10 crores, and 1 crore of halls and chiclets became 35 crores within 24 months, larger than the size of Warner Hindustan that I had joined. So we far exceeded what we had said we would do, which itself was a far-reaching quantum growth assumption. We combined it with go-to-market strategy, implementation, infectious enthusiasm, passion, big-ticket growth ideas like reclassification, coinage, sizing, pricing, merchandising, distribution, distributor salesman, people strategy, advertising off the hook, in terms of real value add and creating of unusual value. I can't even believe that I could do all of that with my team at that time, because while we were doing it, we were so preoccupied doing it that we realized that we were on a mission and we didn't even realize what was going around us. So while we were taking up the share and halls moved up from 10% market share to 35% market share, big scoff drop at that time dropped from 55 to 30. And they would continue to analyze and paralyze and do research on how to prevent the hall's juggernaut, while we did no more research. And our research was the proof of the pudding, which was customer preference moving in our favor. Now, that is an example of quantum growth. Of course, that led to me being virtually deputy MD, group director. Listerine was changed. I did the worldwide compendium sitting in Warren Lambert for Listerine and Listermint back in 91. I did the worldwide compendium for Benelin and Benadryl, which continue to remain all very large brands globally. Looking at global strategy for these. In India, we turned around the businesses. We prepared Benadryl and Gelusil for RX to OTX transfer, and the sleepy Warner Hindustan and Park Davis moved from 70 crores to 225 crores in 1992, growing organically in the pre-liberalization era without any acquisition, without any new product introduction, organic growth and realization and leveraging of the true potential of the company and its brands. Unfortunately, the company got sold over for other reasons, and the brands went here and there. Some went to Pfizer, some went to Mondelez, which again is not treating them well. And therefore, again, quantum growth is about teams of individuals that get together and drive growth. Unfortunately, it's not about promoters. It's not about multinationals and owners with deep pockets of large brands and money, because the same brand in a different environment may not do well. And therefore, quantum growth is largely a people-driven, team-driven, passion-driven kind of an activity. And wherever that has happened, whether in TCS, whether in Titan, whether in Godrej Properties, you have seen quantum growth happen. Because there are people that have got together and their environment, their background, their promoters have not been able to deter them from quantum growth, because they have followed a pattern. And there are many such brands and examples in India which have followed the pattern of quantum growth and created real value, not value which then is 500 rupees a share on one day and 50 rupees a share on the other. So, I'm not talking about Paytm or Zomato as measures of quantum growth. Those are not the kind of models I'm familiar with, and I'm very hesitant to kind of, comment on what their concepts of quantum growth are. For me, unless I see profit at the bottom line, quantum growth is in top line, but more importantly in EBITDA. And unless there is a return on investment, return on capital employed, a return on assets managed, and unless there is light at the end of the tunnel, which can be actually seen, and the color of the money can be seen in a foreseeable future at the bottom line, no growth is quantum growth. Any other model of quantum growth is fraught with danger. It can move either way. So you're looking at quantum growth in sales, market share, and profit. And all three have to be kept on the radar. You cannot have one at the expense of another. Otherwise, you have wild variations in market cap, wild variations in brand fortune, in company fortune, which is not the stability with the Jewish American multinationals, and which companies like Reckitt, on whose board I served in Reckitt South Asia, have taught me. We have consistency, we have stability, we have the ability to deliver, we have sustainability of growth strategies. And quantum growth, therefore, is not flash in the pan. It is not 1 year. It is sustainable brand building. It is the creation of brand value and creation of multiples of sales and profit that the brand comes to embody. That is the concept of quantum growth. I'll take you quickly. Of course, this, is an example which I can go on and on about. You can virtually hear the passion even 30 years after the event, because that is the kind of concept of quantum growth. Now, we don't write case studies and we don't tom-tom it, but this is an example of quantum growth. And anybody who was around at that time may remember it. Of course, I don't do it to play in the gallery or to get onto, page 3 and to run bogus consultancies which talk about how to create businesses. You can only create quantum growth if you have delivered it yourself. And if you haven't delivered it yourself, you can only attempt to summarize what other people have delivered. And that's the concept of quantum growth. If you're looking at the second example, I will take you on to 2004, closer to time this time. And I will take you on to Dabur, India. Now, in 2004, I was approached by Dabur India, Vivek Burman, to kind of help him to grow the Ayurveda business. Ashok Burmanji, who is no longer, and Vivek Burman and the Dabur team, PD Narang, etc., at that time, approached me and said, we are languishing in the Ayurveda. We don't know what this business is doing. It's very close to our heart. We started in 1898, or whenever they started in Kolkata with Ayurveda. They may want to now do Everready, but at that time it was only Ayurveda. And they said, we want to grow this business rapidly. So tell us what to do. And would you like to come in? I said, yes, sure, but I would like to come in reporting directly, effectively to Vivek Burman and not, operating from the KCO head office in Saibabad. So they brought me an office in Delhi next to VC Burman's office. And at this time, I used the same team that they had of 40 managers. And within 15 days, sitting on cold, sultry nights in Saibabad at that time, we worked on the strategic plan for Dabur Ayurveda. The Dabur Ayurveda business at that time was 100 crores. And it had taken the company 120 years to get to the first 100 crores in pure Ayurveda. So in 2004, the pure Ayurveda business got to 100 crores for the first time after I took over it in March of 2004. And it had taken them a full 120 years to get there. But the business was close to their heart because they started with it, and it was a 75-80% gross margin business. And at a time that they had recently acquired Balsara, it was constituting a third of the company's profit at the time. And therefore, they were emotionally charged with their business. They wanted to grow it. Now, they had Accenture that was appointed for their ERP2 consulting and management consulting role. And they had worked on a strategy which had essentially two things. And strategy is about doing the right thing, but it is more important to do not to do the wrong thing in strategy. So strategy is about what not to do rather than what to do. And strategy is about defining why rather than how, what, where, whom, how much. It's how rather than how much. And it is why rather than how. And therefore, if you answer the question why leading to the answering of the question how, then you have strategy. And quantum growth strategy is about defining what not to do rather than what to do. So the first thing I did in the strategic plan, and these were all OTC medication products, where the tripod of OTC medication, which is healthcare endorsement, creation of creation of either direct healthcare endorsement or a perception thereof, pharmacy and pharmacy selling, and mass media and distribution. These are the three wings of the tripod in the OTC area. And very few companies succeed in OTC because they look at OTC from the binoculars of FMCG or the binoculars of pharma, both of which I have handled before as heads of company, and both of which require completely different approaches than the OTC approach. So you can't look at it from a warped perspective of an FMCG company handling OTC or a pharma company handling OTC, because the OTC, over-the-counter medication rules of the game, self-medication rules of the game are different, and you have to understand them. So we said what not to do. So the two recommendations of Accenture was first to get on to the pharma retail business and the modern trade, and the second was to get into massage parlors. I vetoed both. Fortunately, I had the veto power. Burmans were looking at me. I said, nothing doing. This is outside the area of core competence. Strategy is about leveraging your core competencies, not going upstream in a river where you don't know how to swim. And if you have not grown, it is unlikely that you will grow in areas which are outside the area of your core competence. So we rejected retail. They got into retail in 2008 after I'd left them. They closed it in 2009. And massage parlors are, a different business altogether. They are more of a Kerala healthcare business, if not an escorts business. And that is again outside the area of Dabur's core competency. And therefore that I said is completely no. Instead I said, ab Dabur Ayurveda ke leader hai, Ayurved ko protsahan do and become the most admired company in Ayurveda. Your job is to grow the Ayurvedic market, not leave it to the likes of a splintered Baidyanath or a small Charak. They're not going to grow, or a Jandu which was finding feet. You are the ones who have to grow Ayurveda. And therefore, hum Ayurved ko protsahan denge, we will become the most admired Ayurvedic company. The vision simply was, we will become leaders and the number one most admired Ayurvedic company in the world by giving Ayurveda protsahan, और हम ये ग्रोथ के माध्यम से करेंगे. So the mission was clearly 1 2 का 4, go for 40. जो धंधा कभी 10% ग्रो नहीं हो पाया है, उसको 40% ग्रो करो, मार्केट ग्रो करो, धंधा ग्रो करो. और 100 करोड़ आपने 100 साल में बनाए, 200 करोड़ अगले 2 साल में हम साथ में बनाएंगे. So it took Dabur 120 years to go to the first 100 crores. It took them only 2 years to grow to the next 100, 200 crores and 400 crores in 2006. And we did that through a focused strategy of creating value. So we got the people together to work on this strategic plan. And this involved creation of Dabur Ayurvedic centers, 300 of them. We created value around Dabur Ki Diwar, which in the distributors. We worked with the BAMS doctors and the VEDs. We gave them a great boost. We created free consultation camps and free consultation at the Dabur Ayurvedic centers. जहाँ चिकित्सा मुफ्त थी, Dabur पैसा देता था BAMS doctors को और वैदों को, और दवाइयाँ Dabur की बिकती थी. So the concern was, the growth inhibitor was that everybody knew of Ayurveda. Nobody believed it. They thought it was slow, not effective, harmful, not as good as allopathy. And therefore the only way was to get to trial, to get to engagement of the various forces. So we did clinical trials of our products in the Dabur Ayurveda Hospital and in the hospitals in Banaras Hindu University, where we actually kind of created value around these products. We created, the Dabur Divars, Dabur Ayurvedic centers where free chikitsa, including, Hakims in the predominantly Muslim, as you know, UP, Bihar, and Dabur is a Hindi heartland country. 20% of the population was Muslim, and therefore we had special camps with the Hakims involved in the Muslim areas of the Hindi heartland. Now we did all of that, and we kind of created generation of trial, generation of activity. We worked closely with the Ministry of Family Health and Family Welfare, Department of Ayush, to add value. And those days there was a minister called Anbani Ramdas. We worked with him to create value around Ayush. We created international presence. We took Dabur away from the geographies of the Hindi heartland into the largest Ayurvedic markets of Karnataka and Maharashtra, which are the two largest Ayurvedic markets in the country. We did everything which was a growth driver in the right direction. And I had to take a buy-in from the distributors. So I went to Muzaffarpur. I explained to them कि 1 2 का 4 को कैसे होगा. पहले तो वो बोले ये पागल आदमी है, मल्टीनेशनल से आया, कुछ बकवास कर रहा है, कुछ समझ में नहीं आ रहा है कि जो धंधा 10% ग्रो नहीं करता वो 40% की बात कर रहा है, go for 40 की बात कर रहा है. We got the 40 members of the team involved. Now all those 40 managers are today either heading the sales and marketing or some of the regions of large FMCG and pharma players, because they all delivered quantum growth. They are all doing exceptionally well. Some of them have even become managing directors. Because एक बार जब क्वांटम ग्रोथ की बहक आपके जहन में आए, जब आपको क्वांटम ग्रोथ की आदत पड़ जाए, तब आप you will not go back to incrementalism. You will always build in quantum growth. Now we actually created this model in Dabur of actually going out, revitalizing the asavs, the churans. I bought Hanitas, a 3 crore brand from Dabur Pharma, applied the OTC medication rules, and within 18 months it was 22 crores, along with Dabur Hanitas cough drop, larger than Vicks cough formula 44 and Decold put together at that time. So, we turned around those brands, Shilajit Gold in potency, gold products, all kinds of things, asavs, churans, and we created new value in selling, distribution, engagement of distributors, and these were family distributors. I mean, they had personal equations with Vivek Burman. They would come to Lutyens Delhi every year for a meal and to get a gift. Now, those guys who were initially doubting, managers who were initially doubting, began to understand what the model of turnaround of Ayurveda was. और 1-2 का 4 और आयुर्वेद का प्रोत्साहन का मतलब क्या होता है. So what was not even 8 crores per month started hitting 15, 18 crores per month within 18 months. 100 crores in 120 years, 200 crores in 18 months. That is the equation and impact of quantum growth. Now that was what was, and you have to experience it to know it. I have various examples of the Piramal Group, various examples of Strides Arcolab, and you mentioned a colleague of mine there in terms of how, it was the fastest market cap company, and it grew from what I got as stock option in 2008 at 60 rupees to 1250 rupees post 2008, which was faster growing market cap than Sun Pharma or Ranbaxy or any company at that point. So all of these, and of course the model was CRAMS, which is a different model in injectables and in soft gelatin capsules. But the point is, for any strategy in quantum growth, you need to have an infectious enthusiasm, you need to have passion, you need to have go-to-market implementation, apart from an absolute winning combination of the utilization of scarce marketing and business resource to drive quantum big ticket growth ideas and address quantum big ticket growth inhibitors. That is the philosophy of quantum growth that I have kind of learned over a period of time. I have failed several times with several brands, learning constantly from failures. The challenge in quantum growth is never in the marketplace. It is within. It is from doubting Thomases on the board, doubting Thomases that use big four audit agencies to reposition champions of quantum growth, by citing real and fabricated elements of deterrence to quantum growth providers, because quantum growth has a destabilization effect internally in corporations. And I'm not only talking about Indian companies where it is slightly lower, but in multinationals where the stakes are higher, this kind of an activity, unfortunately, and I'm very unconventional, as you can see, I do not belong to the caucus who just sings CII and FICCI songs every time and applauds every finance minister when she comes on a disastrous route to growth via infrastructure building, or every Reserve Bank governor who thinks dove when there is a hawk. We have to call a spade in quantum growth strategy. We have to understand what derives quantum growth. We have to realize that Indian corporate sector cannot be taxed at 16% and must be taxed at 20-odd%, if not more, to deliver top line growth, because the impact of GST will never last, and quantum growth has to be delivered by the corporate sector despite that taxation. So we need to, as I go back to the pandemic, and as I go back to the unfortunate Ukraine war, which I hope has not deteriorated the lives and conditions of Ukrainians in Kiev or Kharkiv in the last 1 hour that I've been speaking. And as we look at the fears of inflation arising from it, on the contraction of demand, on the rising of input cost, commodity cost, on the pressure on gross margins and EBITDA, we need to again reinforce our belief in quantum growth. And we have to look at how we can take some of the strategies that I've talked about to actually the new and next level. Now, for example, the strategy in Dabur, which I just mentioned, was then taken on by Patanjali about 10 years later without any reference or without any honorarium or credit to me. And therefore, what Patanjali is what Dabur should have been had they carried forward the strategy forward. But they were continuously myopic, looking at, for example, film stars and cricketers to bail out healthcare products and to justify price premium of healthcare products, which is not how healthcare products grow. And therefore, the strategy which I had already set for them, unfortunately, with the new management, which kind of retarded growth, led them to kind of being where they are, and Patanjali being the leader in Ayurveda. But Ayurved ko प्रोत्साहन और आयुर्वेद की लीडरशिप ये पतंजलि की स्ट्रेटजी है, ये डाबर की स्ट्रेटजी थी, जो कि पतंजलि आयुर्वेदिक सेंटर्स ने और पतंजलि ने स्केल दिया. They took it to a new level, and I have to give Baba Ramdev ji the credit for actually picking up the right strategy, which he had seen perhaps being implemented 2004 to 2007, and giving it scale, structure, and perception. So hats off to him for actually doing right what we had started to do in Dabur, but which Dabur failed to build on. And therefore, quantum growth is not permanent. It is not promoters, not multinationals that cause it. It is spirited, committed, passionate individuals and teams of individuals that deliver quantum growth. Make sure you have the right team on board. Make sure you have the right attitude. Make sure you have the right empathy. Make sure that you hold each other's hands. You care about each other, care about customer, care about dealer, care about business partner, and don't become the proverbial Shylock, and work towards with them as partners in progress. Care about employees, because empathy, humaneness, emotion is an integral part of quantum growth. That is all I have to say to you. I hope it has benefited some of the young people who are listening to me today, and I would leave the house to questions, or however Rajesh and Kavita ji would like to take it forward.
Oh, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, last 1 hour, I mean, listening to a very, very passionate, I will say, a very practical and amazing knowledge. I must appreciate that. Thank you very much, sir, for sharing with us your experiences and also the knowledge which will be benefited for all the participants.
My pleasure. I would be very happy to answer questions if we have the time.
Yes, we have the time. We have till 7:30. We have just to recapitulate. You shared, on the value creation is essential for quantum growth, which is very essential, and it happens in the marketplace rather than staring at the computers. And you said that what is incremental? Incrementalism is not quantum growth. It is in line with the inflation and market. Thinking out of box is very important for quantum growth, and quantum growth is infectious enthusiasm of the leader and taking of risks in context of reality and without fear, which is very, very important for achieving the quantum growth. The two case studies which you discussed actually of Warner Hindustan, turnaround of Halls and Chiclets, where it mentions that quantum growth is people, team, and passion driven, and quantum growth is the color of the money at the bottom of the line, which is very important. And the turnaround of the Dabur business, which you said, focusing on the core specialty which Dabur had, which is Ayurveda. One of my senior colleague from the EC member, Mr. Indranil Ghosh, has some questions. Indranil ji, I will request you to unmute yourself and ask the question from.
Yeah, good evening, sir. You are really, it was a splendid session, and really And as you said that young people will get benefited, but I am not a young person as such, but I am a veteran engineer, and engineer becoming manager. So hardcore management, I always interested to know. May not be my cup of tea, but definitely I would like to know more about it. So first question which I wanted to ask you is that which has been already answered by you. So I'm not repeating it. It is about the Patanjali and Nirma. These are the two case studies I wanted to know. Patanjali already you have answered, and I think Nirma also will be on the same line. So, but my next question is very interesting, because I understand what you said about strategy development, 10% strategy development, 90% is deployment, right? But when in business excellence we give this course, when we give the score in business excellence, we give almost 50-50 for strategy development and strategy deployment. But what you said, it is really very interesting. You said it is the 10% focus should be on strategy development and 90% focus should be on strategy deployment. So this is one thing that in business excellence, then why we are talking about 50% on strategy development and 50% strategy deployment. That is my first question. Second question, if you see India as a nation.
Can you repeat the question?
See, the question is, so as you said, that 10% is for strategy development.
That I understand. What is the question?
In business excellence, when we assess the business excellence for any organization, when we give the score, when we give the marks in the business excellence assessment, we give weightage 50% to the strategy development and 50% to the strategy deployment. So we give equal score to both development and deployment. Whereas for quantum growth, as you said, it is 10% and 90%. So why in business excellence, various business excellence model, whatever it is, maybe Malcolm Baldrige model or any other model. So why these weightage is given 50-50 in case of strategy development and strategy deployment? That is my first question.
So let me answer the first question and then I will answer the second.
Yeah.
Implementation is difficult. Yeah. Implementation is not easy. Implementation requires dirtying of feet. Yeah. And therefore, for most strategic consultants, it is easy to kind of, opine, give a report, give a strategic template, and then send the bill. Now, what happens after that is not really what they do. Now, I still consult for SMEs. I consult for various companies that are smaller, or even larger companies, which are looking at strategic growth. And what I'm talking about, it may not be 10-90, I said that for impact, but yeah, it is definitely 70-30 in favor of implementation. Because if you can't demonstrate what the strategy will deliver, and if you can't have a follow-up, in terms of, it's like putting up a machine. The aftermarket is more important than the selling of the machine. Now, right, if you can't do that, then what kind of a strategy is it? So you need nurturing, growth, the proper development of the game plan in its implementation mode. All this is important. Now, the Kremlin and Putin may have had a great strategy, and what a sham they've made of implementing. Such a small country has stood there, old women, senior people, they've stood there for 7 days, and several of their plants don't even work. The petrol doesn't work. What type of strategy is that? Now, eventually might will prevail, and bombarding will prevail because of sheer strength. You can always put resources unlimited. खूबी ये है कि कम resources में result ज़्यादा कैसे आए? ये strategy होती है, वो implementation से आती है. In fact, India should be concerned. We have two big concerns on the geopolitical level. The rascals in the multipolar world should be laughing their way, and China must be waiting to kind of look at Arunachal and Taiwan with greater interest if we allow these people to go away with impunity. And the other thing is 50% of our equipment come from Russia, defense equipment. And we've seen such a sorry display of them when they actually go out. So if I were the government of India, I would not bother about abstaining. I would bother about actually and carrying forward, strategies which may be outdated from the non-aligned movement and the 10 days, and look at what we need to do now to kind of overcome them. So that's what I mean. Because, in implementation is the victory. If you can't implement, पैसे से, strategy paper से, Big Four के पास जाने से थोड़ी हर business succeed होता है.
Right.
That's the point.
All right.
Indranil Da, do I make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense. But see, that means these business excellence models need to be changed. Instead
Sir,
of
I will add to that.
Yeah.
I am also a practitioner of the management in the real sense.
Yeah.
And I have always followed the Pareto's principle of 80-20. And Sir said 10-90 and then 70-30. I say 80-20 in terms of implementation versus planning is absolutely yes, yes.
Right.
No company has succeeded beyond that. And 90% of companies have failed because of implementation.
Because of?
Sir, implementation.
Right.
Yeah. And even the 80-20, as I told you, my 80-20 for halls was selling, distribution, merchandising, ready cash vans, ready delivery.
Right.
So you have to identify what that 80-20 is.
Yeah.
Most of the time, management's mistake irrelevant things for important.
While we are on it, I will request all the participants to turn on their cameras with a beautiful smile for a photograph by our team, and we can answer all the questions. Carry on with that. Indranil sir, you have any other question?
Yes, sir. Because my question partly I have asked. Another question is now, if you see the India as a nation. India as a nation, what government can do is they can form policy. That means strategy development part only they can take care. Ultimately, implementation they cannot do directly. It has to be done by the corporates and business houses, right? Now, when you talk about as a nation, or you talk about quantum growth, so as a government, they can only form policy, and also they can give some incentives in form of implementation. But actual implementation has to be done by the business houses and corporates, and that is why CII and FICCI comes into picture. So we cannot ignore them totally so far quantum growth is concerned. So that is my question. Say what should be the role of FICCI and CII so far quantum growth of the country is concerned?
So CII and FICCI will continue to kind of give the right inputs to the government, which are not selfish, but which are in the direction of the growth of the economy, number one. Number two, we are very, very fortunate in having a brilliant government for the last 6 odd years, which we did not have the benefit of in the previous 70 years. Right. If you look at Nitin Gadkari and his ministries of infrastructure, of SME development, they are all implementation focused.
Right.
This is a brilliant government. It is only that some of their advisors are taking them up the garden path in monetary and fiscal policy. And they have to, talk to more well-wishers like you and me to understand what might need to be done.
Yeah.
So therefore, this government is brilliant. You look at several ministries.
Yeah.
There are 4 ministers who are currently in Hungary, Poland. Have you thought of it ever that Indian ministers will go to war places?
Yeah.
To evacuate people. And you have these third-class anti-national channels, some TV channels who make politics out of one Karnataka student that dies. Do you think it is easy for any government to evacuate people in Kharkiv at this time?
So my humble request is let's focus on the, this topic.
The topic, I'm focusing on the topic. The question that was raised is what do we do with the government on implementation? They are implementing. And as industry bodies, we have to give them the right advice and we have to actually assist them to implement. They are implementing. Let us be fair. We should not always be critical. What they are doing well, we should acknowledge.
Absolutely. I think absolutely right. And my colleague, Mr. From EC, Mr. Jagmohan Rishi has a question to ask. Jagmohan, will you unmute yourself and ask?
Yes, sir, definitely. Thank you very much for giving an opportunity. Nitin sir, good evening. It is a pleasure to see you and hear you. I am ex-Park Davian. So I have seen you in the office with when you were heading that CPD, I'll call it. and made chiclets and many other products successful. I just wanted to have a question that of late, there has been a policy shift of many of the products which are, consumer products, prescription products moving to consumer products. To name a few, for example, when you were there were Gelusil and Benadryl. They were already prescription products, but now they have moved into consumer products. So do you think the policy is the right thing with respect to growth of the organization and the country also?
See, this is a specific category-driven question. There are some categories, pharmaceutical sales are about a continuum. So you have API, research-driven products, biologics, biosimilars at one end of the continuum. Then you have what we call prescription products. Then we have what you call OTX or RTX products, which are part prescription and part self-medicated. You have then products which are OTC, which are self-medicated. And then you have the FMHG and FMCG sectors. So different pharmaceutical formulations are at different stages in this continuum. Now, there are times when the products are ready to move from one point to another, like RX to OTX, OTX to OTC. So whenever you expect that the top line and bottom line growth from that brand can be leveraged by switching strategy into a slightly different segment, you do that. So what was done with Benadryl and Gelusil was precisely that. Today, if you know, Combiflam is trying to do it. There are other brands like Combiflam and others which are trying to do it. So this continuum is a pharmaceutical reality, and individual companies and brands have to then decide what is opportune and what is right strategy for an individual brand at an individual point in time. Rishi, does that answer your question?
Sir, yes, thank you very much. My question was that, keeping, of course, when we think from the marketing point of view, it definitely makes sense. But then when it makes it the self-medication point of view, does it take care of that also? Because many of the prescription products definitely, anyway, this is a different category product discussion. I can have separate discussion with you, sir, on that.
Yeah. So it is not about individual divisions, political SKU and SBU centers. It is about what the customer and market would want you to do.
Yeah.
So strategy has to flow. Strategy has to flow from the marketplace, and the consumer and the market and the competition needs to drive that. And
many
individual
times, sir, the
companies
market
have
also
to appropriately modify their plan.
Yeah. So many times the market also determines the strategy. For example, Dolo versus Combiflam. Where Dolo has gone because of COVID, and Combiflam is still, way behind Dolo.
Yeah, there is one factor which is beyond all of us, which is the power of Almighty and luck.
Absolutely.
Dolo has been an extremely lucky brand.
That's right. Thank you very much, sir.
Hey, I think Indranilji, you have raised your hand.
I have raised my hand because I have a last question to ask, because this is the only opportunity I will get to interact a personality like him. Sir, we are all BMA members, and we are all concerned that BMA should grow leaps and bounds. So do you have any tips to share that how we can get quantum growth? Because it is not a business house, it is a only charitable institution, right? No profit organization. But still we would like to grow so that BMA will be a household name everywhere in all part of the country. So can you give
I don't believe that I can give you an off-the-cuff answer. This would require discussion with my friend Kavita and various office bearers of BMA. I would be happy to, in more normal times, spend a couple of hours if you buy me some tea and vada pav, etc. And then we can discuss that.
Right, sir. Thank you. Thank you. We'll see that.
No, I think that's wonderful. So I don't know if we have our past president Inderpal ji, who has been in the meeting, if he is there still. Inderpal ji, are you there? If you can unmute and share your thought, because you are from industry and you have been very, very actively participating.
Inderpal ji is not there.
He was there actually. Okay.
I have heard of Inderpal ji. Please communicate my regards to him.
Sure. Yeah. So if there is any question, anybody can raise hand and ask. I think otherwise we are close to the session, and I will just wait for 1 minute if anybody has any question. Anybody can unmute and ask. That's my request. If anybody has any question. I think nobody has. So, sir, thank you very much for sharing a very, very passionate.
I'll just make a disclosure. The views that I have expressed are my own. And as you can see, I don't represent the views of the corporations that I may have headed. They are my personal views. And these are learnings which I have picked up. See, like many of you and my students, I have grown from scratch and from the bottom. I haven't landed any of my MD or CEO positions. So I've learned the hard way, and I often do not hesitate to share, my learnings with the over 22,000 students that I've had. I've been teaching for 40 years now, and various audiences like the august audience I'm talking to today. So it is something which I have learned, which I'm sharing. I don't mean disrespect or I don't mean to undermine any other company, person, or strategy. It's just my concepts that I have placed before you. So thank you once again for giving me the opportunity. Kavita ma'am, thank you. And I'm indeed very delighted that I have been able to come here. And Kavita ji has my numbers. You're most welcome to be in touch individually and on behalf of BMA. And I'll be happy to interact if at all you need my assistance for anything else going forward.
Mr. Ghadiyar, thank you so much for sparing time and enlightening all the participants and members with your knowledge and the passion which you carry with yourself. That's more important, because you said that enthusiasm is contagious. Enthusiasm is contagious, which is very, very important for any leader, which is a big take home for all of us here. Thank you very much for being with us. I thank all the EC members who have been present in this meeting, my past presidents like Mr. Inderpal ji, President Ms. Kavita ji, and all the participants. And I will urge all the participants who are not member of BMA to become member of BMA, so that you have the advantage of getting the benefits of all the knowledge which we get on this platform. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much. All the very best and good luck to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.